Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blue Collar Gospel Hour. I'm your host, Dan Denton. We're recording in Not a Duck in Any Row Studios, a basement studio in West Toledo, Ohio. I'm here this evening with my special guest, Theresa Konwinski. That's Konwinski. Theresa comes highly recommended by a couple of close friends of mine, one of them being my wife, who met her in a writers group. Theresa is a retired nurse who spent part of her nursing career in psych wards, ICUs, surgery, and in the administrative managerial side. She also used to play in a rock band in the 80s, if I remember correctly. And she is the author of 4 self-published books, and a 5th one is in the work, I think. Mm-hmm. And she's also an accomplished poet, even though she's going to tell us different later. And just an overall interesting, fascinating, and did I mention traveler? Welcome, Theresa.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you.
Yeah.
So, and we're here with my wonderful life partner, Libby, who's just hanging out with her arms crossed, begrudging to have the microphone on in front of her. Hi, Libby.
Hi, but I'm smiling so big.
Yeah.
She is smiling. If she got close to her microphone, we could even hear her probably. So Theresa, how have you been?
I have been really good. Even though this has been like the weirdest year of my entire 67 years, I am good. Life is good. You mentioned traveling, and we did have a great month-long trip out west in the spring and had the best stinking time, enjoyed seeing all of the sights of New Mexico and Arizona and Texas and Oklahoma and California. It was great, great fun.
That's great. You were just telling me before the episode, before we started recording, that going to California and looking at the mountains and made me a little jealous. I haven't been able to travel much.
Listen, if you get the chance to do a road trip out west, you really should. Don't miss the Grand Canyon. I actually cried when I saw the Grand Canyon, not to sound like a nerd, but it was
okay.
so
We're nerd-friendly here.
Amazing, so beautiful. There are no pictures that can ever do it justice. The colors, the shadows, how the light hits the mountains at different times of the day. It's truly incredible. And Yosemite, seeing El Capitan, and there's another rock formation called Half Dome. These are things that you see on television, and they almost don't seem real. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to see them in person, it is absolutely breathtaking, and that's not an exaggeration. The other thing that we got to see that I really was astounded at how beautiful it was the Painted Desert. If you ever get to go see the Painted Desert, oh my gosh, it's, again, the colors and how the light plays on the different mounds in the Painted Desert. It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing, And of course the Pacific Ocean is beautiful, and the plant life in California is so different from what we see here. We have friends who live there, and they said when they moved to California, they had to get used to a different kind of how do you grow stuff out here, because it's so completely different. A lot of succulents, of course, compared to here. They don't have any lilac bushes or, that kind of stuff that we're used to having around here. And so they had to kind of get used to, this is not Ohio, so we're not going to be growing the same stuff we grew in Ohio out here in Southern California, So it was a great trip. I feel like we were so blessed. We had good weather all the way out there and back pretty much. Really didn't run into any issues. My brothers had told me it would be kind of boring in spots, and I totally disagree. It never was boring, not for a second. It was weird. You'd be driving through the middle of the desert, and it's all brown with just a little bit of sage kind of brush and stuff, And then in the distance are these mountains with snow on top. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing trip.
So who went on this trip with you?
Just my husband and I.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And it was nice having some time in the car just to be with Frank and kind of talk to him about plans for the future and, what I wanted to do with my writing or, Frank doesn't really read what I write. So I have to tell him about everything that I'm working on, So Anyway, it was just a great trip. We had a blast.
When you guys travel, do you listen to the radio? Do you listen to audiobooks, podcasts?
We listen to music.
Yeah.
We're both. Frank's a drummer,
okay.
A very good drummer, as a matter of fact.
We should have Frank on the show sometime.
Yeah, yeah, he's a really good drummer, and so we listen to music, and it's mostly classic rock kind of stuff that we're listening to. Beatles, Rolling Stones.
That's good stuff.
Yep, it'll never go out of style.
No.
I think long after I'm gone, people will still be listening to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
That's the trademark of good art is it's timeless.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what your genre of art is.
Yep.
That one of the things coronavirus stole from me was I was going to attempt to try to get a ticket to go see the Stones play at Wrigley Field this summer.
Yeah.
They're my favorite band that I've never seen them play live.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that got canceled, and so...
I wish that we would have gotten to see George Harrison and John Lennon when they were alive. We've gotten to see Ringo Starr here at the Zoo Amphitheater, and we got to see Paul McCartney several years ago down in Columbus. What a show. God, that guy, he's so good. He hasn't lost a beat, He is so good. And you think about the number of songs that between him and John Lennon, those guys wrote together and separately. That body of work is completely amazing to me, you know. There's hardly ever a Beatles song that I don't like, Yeah,
that's and I don't want to rip roar out from the gate and start offending my guests. But a lot of my friends know I'm pretty legendary for talking shit about the Beatles. But I do it tongue in cheek. The Rolling Stones are my all-time favorite band.
Yeah.
And I love the Beatles. I love the Beatles for who they are, for who they were. Some of their songs are some of the best written songs of all time.
Yeah.
Iconic. Like they really are probably bigger than Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But because I like the Stones more. I like to talk shit and poke fun at, I'll call them like the first boy band or,
Yeah. Oh, we did that all through high school. There were always these debates about who was better, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, and that's kind of that part of that debate. Yeah. So, and I do love the Beatles. And I probably, like a lot of artists, I enjoy, like John Lennon. I enjoy him more for who he was in his life and his message and his philosophy almost more than I do his music.
Yeah.
Just because... Kind of like Hemingway. Hemingway was so crazy and interesting. And Hunter S. Thompson, like a lot of these artists, Yeah. So, but yeah, we didn't get to go see the Dead this year either. We usually go to a Dead show every year, and we didn't get to do anything.
Yeah,
like that.
Coronavirus changed life around quite a bit.
We got locked away in the
all
basement, all summer.
Yeah.
So.
I think Frank and I have talked about this a number of times. I know you guys are younger than Frank and I are. I'll be 68 this March coming up. And I feel like we grew up in one of the absolutely most productive, creative times in the history of the world, probably. I mean, think about particularly the arts, the changes that came about in music, the changes that came about in literature, the changes that came about in movies, and I mean, just even how they're produced, how they're made, We've gotten to see a lot of amazing changes in our lifetime, and I feel like we were really, really lucky to grow up in the period of time that we did.
Yeah.
So
and
technology.
Oh my God. I was going to say technology. Like even for me, being a little younger, I just turned 42, and I was telling my 16-year-old kids the other day, like they have never lived in a time when people didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
And I was telling them the other day, like I remember payphones. Like I would have to wait till the end of school. And if I missed the bus, I had to go to the payphone and put a quarter in and call my mom at home on the home phone and try to get a ride home. And now my kids have it's foreign to them, but and even I take it for granted, and I forget what it was like to have to carry quarters, And
yeah.
So even technology and the way that has changed art drastically is amazing. Oh,
absolutely. Yep. And we have two kids, Aaron and Amy. Aaron is 38 and Amy's 36 now. And when they were little, they had friends who would come to visit, and particularly Amy. She had one little girlfriend who came over, and when it was time to call her mom to say, okay, I'm ready to be picked up, we had a rotary phone, and she's like, I don't know how to use this. Where are the buttons? And I'm like, really? You don't know how to use rotary phone? So that's just the kind of stuff that we've seen. Think of where we have come from the time that we still had rotary phones plugged into the wall.
Yeah.
So.
I used to have a Saturn, and somebody a lot younger than myself got on in the car, and they went to roll down the window, and they didn't know what the window crank was. They couldn't figure out how to roll down the window.
Where's the button? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it like playing in a rock band? You played keys?
I
And
did.
Did you sing too, or
I did, yeah.
what was your band's name?
Well, we started out being called the Stat Band because the other girl in the band with me, we had gone to nursing school together, and stat is a word for
yeah.
medicine, and
Yeah.
so we called ourselves the Stat Band. But anyway, we played in bars, just little local bars, and didn't make a lot of money at it, and it was. I know that I would not want to spend my life playing music in bars. I knew over time that was not going to be for me. I love music, but that just wasn't my scene after a time. But once we got pregnant and had kids, we thought, like, man, we can't be staying out till 3 o'clock in the morning on Fridays and Saturday nights anyway. That just wasn't working out. So we morphed into a wedding band. And yeah. And so we still played music that we liked, which meant probably that we weren't always the most popular wedding band either, because we played music we liked and didn't want to play a lot of stuff that people like at weddings.
Yeah.
Proud Mary and, the stuff that you got here at every wedding, celebration or what.
Did you and Frank play together then?
We did for a time, but Frank did not want to be a part of a wedding band. He was not interested in the wedding band scene. And when he departed, we got another drummer in, and actually it was a guy that Frank had known from high school, who was like a year younger than Frank, who was also an exceptional drummer. His name's Gary Cable, and Gary played drums for us when we did the whole wedding band gig, so yeah. It was fun. I loved the people that I've been in bands with, and we had rotation of personnel over the years. We were lucky to get to play with some really, really good musicians. A guy named Brian Rumbalski, who actually now lives in Michigan, kind of not in the Upper Peninsula, but close to the Upper Peninsula. And God, what a guitar player he was. And I would listen to him play and think, like, what are you doing in Toledo? What are you doing in Toledo? But as we talked about, Toledo has a very strong, a great music scene, So yeah, it was fun, and I still know a number of people in the music world, and I'm glad that we have such a vibrant music scene in Toledo that people don't feel like they have to leave their home to be a musician,
Yeah, there really is a big scene for a small town, kind of.
Yeah,
and some of that maybe is because we're between Detroit and Chicago and Cleveland, and once I've morphed into having friends in Detroit now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
How long have you and Frank been together?
38 years.
Wow.
38 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. I gotta have Frank on the show.
Yeah.
He's
a good guy.
Do you ever consider doing any reunion shows, or do you?
No, something. I don't play the piano much anymore. I never was good at it. I mean, that's just the truth. I never was good at piano.
You're saying that to a guy that knows 4 chords on a guitar.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been able to play guitar without looking at it to change chord.
Yeah.
Like I'm terrible.
Yeah. Well, you and I would probably do well together then. So, I like piano, but in truthfulness, this might sound nutty, but in 2013 I had pneumonia. And I coughed my head off for about 6 weeks before I ever went to the doctor. And I think I did something to one of my vocal cords or something. I've never been able to sing a full song since I had pneumonia. And when I couldn't sing anymore, I sort of lost my interest in the piano too. And I didn't play for years. And I was busy, to tell you the truth. I had a very busy job. I was in school working on my doctorate. I was right up to my eyeballs all the time.
Do you have a doctorate?
I do, yeah.
In nursing?
In nursing practice,
That's
yes.
amazing. My brother just got his doctorates in nursing.
Oh, no kidding.
Which is, my brother, I got to get him on the show eventually. My brother got his nursing degree, worked in a group home for children, got his bachelor's degree in nursing, and worked in an ER. His dream was to be a flight nurse, became a flight nurse. He works at Arch Medical in St. Louis as a flight nurse now. Got his master's degree, started teaching continuing education, and just finally got his doctor's degree because he wants to teach.
Yeah.
And like that's so fascinating. First of all, I'm a pretty intelligent, well-read factory worker. Like I didn't even know you could get a doctor's degree in nursing.
Yeah.
So I like to make fun of him for that.
Yeah.
I always tell him he does everything kind of weird and backwards. Like you're the only guy I know that's a doctor or nurse. I can talk shit to him because I'm bigger than he is, you know.
Listen, there's a very funny YouTube video by a guy. I can't remember this doctor's name now, but the YouTube video is called "Do Nurses Want to Be Doctors?" And it's all about why there shouldn't be doctor nurses. But you know something? It's a terminal degree. It's the final step that you can get. My degree is a DNP. I don't know if your brother has a DNP or a PhD.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could even get a doctor's degree in nursing.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
A PhD is the highest academic degree that you can get. A DNP is the highest practice degree you can get. And I
Okay.
was in active practice still. That seemed like the more appropriate degree to me. As it turns out, when I retired from St. Luke's, that's where I met Mike McCoy, by the way. Mike and I worked together at St. Luke's for, at least 20 years.
He's going to start a podcast here in the studio, too.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
that's so
I can't
yeah.
wait.
Yeah, Mike will be
That's-
great at it, yeah.
He knows everybody.
Doesn't he, though? Gosh. Anyway, heck, I don't even know where I was going with that.
You were working at St.
St.
Luke's.
Luke's.
I'm sorry. You got your doctor's degree, and you were
Yeah.
doing administrative stuff more
Oh
then,
yeah,
or?
yeah. And when I retired from there, that's what I was getting ready to tell you. I did go and teach. That's another thing that was nice about having this DMP is that it gave me the opportunity to teach them when I retired from St. Luke's. I didn't really, St. Luke's had joined ProMedica at one point, and ProMedica, as part of their growth and in the merger and so forth, they kind of looked at all of the people that they had as a part of this organization and kind of realized, I think, that they didn't need all these people, that they could do some right sizing, is what we always call that, I guess.
Yeah.
And instead of just laying a bunch of people off at that time, they said, hey, are any of you guys interested in early retirement package? And I had been in the VP job for 13 and a half years at that point. I thought about it for a while. It wasn't the easiest decision in the world to make, but there was a point in time where I started to feel like, I could be free of this and not have this stress in my life all the time. And so I did. I took the early retirement package, and I got to tell you, I've never really looked back, except for one time, and that was when the Federal Trade Commission came to ProMedica and said, you can't have St. Luke's. And then I felt like, what are all of my friends experiencing right now? All these people that I've known and loved all these years. I worked at St. Luke's for 32 years. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best places in town to work. That's not to say that we didn't have our own little sets of problems and problems that we couldn't always solve, But that said, the people who worked at St. Luke's Hospital were second to none in terms of their commitment to excellence, their commitment to each other as team members. It was a great place to work. I feel like I grew up a lot at St. Luke's, So it wasn't the easiest decision in the world to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave and good luck with everything, And so when the Federal Trade Commission came in and said, you got to break this back up again, there was this side of me that said, I should be there so I can help support all my friends. And there was part of me that thought, like, man, what a learning experience this would be. How do you unwind something like this? Once you've put it together, how do you then take it back apart? There was a saying at the time, the egg is already scrambled. Once it's scrambled, you can't separate it back out again. And I thought, that it was real scrambled over there. How are they going to do this? I thought it would have been a great opportunity to learn, But I got to be honest, that feeling only lasted about 5 minutes. And then I thought, I'm really glad I'm not in the middle of all that right now,
Yeah.
I've thought the same thing over the summer. I'm glad I'm not in the middle of all this COVID crap, I enjoyed teaching. I had really nice students who I taught
Where
over
did you
at Lourdes,
teach at?
Lourdes University.
Lourdes, okay.
Yeah. And gosh, what a nice school that is, We had really wonderful students. I enjoyed all the kids that came through that program, I started out in the undergrad program, and then I did a little bit of work in the grad program too, teaching the kids that were working on their master's degrees. So it is so fun to watch the light bulb go off for somebody, I never really thought I would want to be a teacher, but I enjoyed it for the years that I did it. And then this year, I just thought, I think I'm done. I think I'm just done working now, Time to focus a
Is
little
that
bit
I
on
was gonna,
writing.
well,
and,
that's probably got to be a little easier transition, being that you have a writing career, kind of.
yeah.
Let me ask you. I was kind of wondering as you were talking, and you said you were kind of glad not to be at work during this COVID stuff as a nurse, and like, how did you feel this year? Excuse me, seeing like all of these nurses and hospital workers hailed as like heroes all of a sudden. Probably, nursing has always been one of those noble professions. For example, last year as a UAW worker, like I spent a lot of time supporting the St. V's strike.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know, like, there's a lot of nurses in the UAW.
Yes.
And, that's an easy strike to get public sentiment on your side because everybody loves nurses. That's kind of, but even this year, even more so, like, nurses were hailed as frontline first responder heroes, like, how did you feel about that? Like, how did it feel kind of watching that unfold?
To be honest, I thought, why hasn't anybody noticed that before?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I'm serious. I think that it's nurses, and not just nurses, but people who work in healthcare in general, are really unsung heroes a lot of the time. I think people have this sense that it's almost like it's an expectation that nurses and other healthcare workers are just going to be there. And people don't have a good understanding of the levels of burnout that are in the healthcare professions right now, and how hard these people work every single day of their lives. There's not an easy day in healthcare anymore. It's almost laughable. When I went to nursing school, people who were going to have simple procedures, or what we call simple procedures now, would come into the hospital the night before, get prepped up for their surgery or whatever procedure they were having done, and just they'd be up walking around the hospital. There was really nothing wrong with them. And think about that compared to now. You got to be sicker than a dog to get in the hospital in the first place. So the patient acuity level is very high. Hospitals are all under the gun to cut their budgets and keep things really, really skinny. And so the staffing levels feel tight all the time. There's no respite. There's no respite in healthcare anymore.
I promised Theresa not to get political because we wanted to have fun tonight.
Yeah.
Not that we can't have fun, or not that we shouldn't be political, but we'll leave the Medicare to all as a different discussion for a different podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the sense I gathered from that strike last year. That was actually one of the things they were striking over was patient to nurse ratios.
Yeah.
And like that was a really good opportunity for me, somebody that works in a factory that doesn't necessarily pay any attention to a hospital or how it's staffed, to like learn, like, oh wow, like they work really fucking hard. Like,
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
That's
There we go. Excuse my language. But that was, I think that was kind of the interesting thing this year, not to take anything away from firefighters and policemen and soldiers and not to take anything away from them. But for the first time in my lifetime, you saw like grocery store workers who really are a critical part of our economic food chain, who really are critical to our community, hailed as heroes.
Yeah.
We saw nurses, ambulance drivers, people that delivered pizza.
Yeah.
Like just everyday ordinary people. Not that nurses are everyday ordinary people. I know they're not. But, getting some of that credit, becoming more talked about than police officers or soldiers, And maybe that's a little bit of balance. Even teachers. Like I've had so many people I work with talk about trying to homeschool their kids. And even my kids got behind, trying to learn at school, at home,
Yeah.
And like how important teachers are,
It was hard to hear some people called essential and other people deemed not essential. And I think like all work is honorable. All work is honorable.
Yeah, that was Dr. King.
Matter.
Dr. King, that was one of his famous quotes. All labor has dignity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the truth, So it was kind of hard to hear, people really felt hurt by that kind of stuff. And it was sad. I know obviously there are some things that we probably don't have to get done. I don't have to get my nails done. That doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the person who's doing, who's doing that work, But man, I tell you, I was really proud of the nursing profession for sure. I was also really dismayed to hear people talk about not having enough personal protective equipment. That was very
Sure.
concerning to me. I sewed a heck of a lot of masks this year, you know.
That's
And
right.
I was doing
Libby,
it because I was trying to protect my friends, you know.
Libby kept bringing that up to me this week. I knew I had it in the back of my mind to ask you about that because that's amazing and selfless, and we need more like stories about that in America. But I forgot, even though my wife reminded me 16 times. So you were sewing masks this year.
Yeah, yep. I knew I had some material upstairs, and I can sew a little bit, you know. And I thought that's something I can do. I'm not on the front lines anymore, but I can do something to try to help protect the front lines as much as possible. You know, and cloth masks, scientifically, you know, they have limited ability to protect you, you know, but nevertheless, if you've got one N95 that you're supposed to use all week long, or one surgical mask that you're supposed to use all week long, maybe this thing that I'm giving you can kind of help make your real mask last a little longer. You know,
Yeah.
that was what was in my head, you know. So anyway, yeah, I've made a lot
Yeah,
of
I've tried
mess.
to. So tell me if this makes sense. So I have a very layman's understanding of medical, terms and medical science and research. Like, I'm fascinated by science. I trust the CDC. I know they have a $6 billion a year budget, and even though I'm smart, I'm not going to out Google their research. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But at work, as a union official at work, I've tried to explain to the people I work with. So we wear the blue paper mask, right? And I tell them, listen, that this mask is not 100% safe.
Yeah.
But if I wear a mask and I have the virus, it decreases the chances of me passing it on to you.
Yes.
Now, if I have a mask and you have a mask also, now we're still not 100% safe, but maybe we're 98% safe now.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's way safer.
Yep.
And the testament to that is, like, there's been dozens and dozens of cases of people at Jeep that have been sent home for having coronavirus.
Yeah.
Or their relatives have tested positive or whatever.
Yeah.
And as an elected union official, I'm around those people, and I haven't gotten sick yet, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And that's a testament that, hey, some of these procedures are working. It is making it drastically safer,
Yeah.
even if it's not 100%. I think there was a
Yeah.
misconception, or there still is a misconception, that, well, this isn't an N95, so I shouldn't bother. And it's like, wait a minute, like, this is
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Like, we're all going to grocery stores, many of us,
Yeah.
to even to restaurants and doing things, and we're not having these great super spreader,
Yeah, exactly
So
right. Yeah.
maybe the
exactly
CDC
right.
was onto something early
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
I know early on Dr. Fauci said no mask, and then
Yep.
right away he's like, no, wait a minute, we should wear,
Yeah.
like they were onto something, I guess,
Listen, one of my cousins works at Costco, and she works at the cash registers quite a bit, and she actually has emphysema from working in a plant where there was a lot of paper dust.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got back from vacation, she called and she said, "Should I be wearing a mask?" And I told her, a mask will not protect you that much at this point. A mask will not really protect you that much. But it'll protect other people from you if you get sick, So she did, of course, we all started wearing masks eventually. It's really, it was a novel virus. I mean, we're learning stuff about this every single day. So there are all these people who are kind of the naysayers about masks seem to glom on to that. Well, Fauci said we didn't have to wear one back in the beginning. And, instead of thinking about this is, as we get more and more information, how we have to change how we look at this virus based on the most recent information we have. It's disappointing to me when people are so freaked out about a mask and they're absolutely, you're taking away my rights, you're taking away my freedom. I don't have to wear a mask. You can't make me wear a mask. I'm throwing all my groceries on the floor because you asked me to wear a mask, or, this goofy behavior. Let's just all do the best we can for each other. It's that simple to me.
And I try to explain that too. Like, I have anxiety issues. I have mental health. I've had mental health challenges, and I've got anxiety, and I'm overweight, and I smoke cigarettes, and wearing a mask is uncomfortable. I work in a factory. Sometimes it's warm. And I sweat, and I have a beard, and all of these excuses. But in reality, at the end of the day, like, the people that I represent are expected to work on an assembly line all day wearing a mask. Like, who am I to complain? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
so what? I got to wear a mask. It does make my tops of my ears get a little tender down again.
Yeah.
Because I don't wear any of those fancy ear savers because I'm too stubborn. But it's been a wild year, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sure has
So-
been. Yep.
Well, let's talk about your writing.
Okay.
So you've got 4 books
I do.
completed,
I do.
available.
They are available. You can get them either at Gathering Volumes over in Perrysburg.
Ooh, Gathering Volumes. I love that place.
I do too. Yeah, I'm so glad to have a little independent bookstore in town.
Yes.
So, and there, of course, you can get them through Amazon and Barnes and Nobles too. The first book I wrote was in 2016, and it was sort of a reaction to the world felt really hateful to me that year, and it's called An Extraordinary Year, and it's really about the year 1963, and it's kind of about me and my brothers growing up in this small town in northwest Ohio. We grew up in Benton Ridge, Ohio, which is just down about 8 miles southwest of Findlay, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, it takes the year 1963 and breaks it apart by months, and in every month there's kind of a story or two about events that happened to us. Not all of it is true. It's probably about 50 to 60% true, and the rest of it's just all made up out of my
it's
head,
fiction.
Yeah, it's fiction, yeah. But it was, and I made a lot of rookie mistakes in that book, But I got to tell you, to date, that still was the most fun one to write.
So let me ask you this: when you said you did that, you wrote that in 2016.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Had you written before?
I had done a little bit of poetry writing as a young woman, but I always felt very self-conscious about my poetry. I didn't really share it very much because it always felt so personal, and I thought no one else is going to get this but me. And I still feel that way about my poetry. To be honest with you, I don't consider myself anywhere near like any kind of a professional poet. I always kind of feel like my connections make sense to me in the poem, but they don't always make sense to the reader, So I'm a little self-conscious about my poetry, but I like writing it when I'm inspired to write it, So, which is not, it's like I don't write a poem every day or anything like that. I don't have that in me, When we were in the band, my friend Cindy and I did some songwriting. And I like songwriting because I love the idea of, it's like poetry, telling a story in just this small amount of time, and of course you're talking about rhyme and rhythm and all that sort of thing in, in songwriting as well as in poetry. That's kind of poetry is strange for me. I'll get a rhythm in my head. There's like a cadence to poetry that forms my poem sometimes. Or, this might sound nutty, but I'll see a shape of a poem, how it looks when it's on the page. And so I work the poem to fit that shape. Now, that may be why I'm not a good poet, because I'm kind of imposing these weird...
Yeah, you're giving yourself some
restrictions
unique challenges.
Or something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or one of the poems that I wrote, it's called Sunset. And it's not a happy poem. It's about a woman who kills her spouse,
Okay.
But in each stanza, the first line has 5 syllables. The second line has 8 syllables. So the third line had to have 13 syllables. I just do these weird things to myself. And like I say, that may actually have a negative impact on my ability to write a good poem.
I always feel like that makes you like a serious quote-unquote poet. And I'm always a little jealous because I'm not a serious quote-unquote poet. Like,
yeah, but I've heard your poetry. But you did like a Facebook reading, and I was like, wow, this guy is a good poet.
Well, thank you. I write with a lot of heart, I guess. But I guess recently I did something kind of I'm always trying to make my poetry tighter. I feel like sometimes I'll write something and it's kind of good, but it's loose and sloppy a little. Well, lately I've been trying to write poetry and not use the word "and" ever in a poem.
Yeah.
which is a really unique challenge. I've
Yeah.
never, and I don't know if that makes it better poetry or worse. Hell, I don't know. It's just something I'm trying, I guess. But I always feel jealous when I hear like the really good writers like do like I know this incredible local poet Leonard, and he'll write like 11 line poems, and each line has 11 syllables.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, holy heck. Like, why would you torture yourself like that? Like, that has to be, like, that would drive me nuts. And I think that's why I love poetry is there's, like, so little rules, really.
Yeah.
Like, you saying that you see the shape and you form your poem to that. Like, that's amazing. Like, I don't know why you would restrict yourself like that, but that's amazing, and that's what I love about poetry is there's not really any wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Which...
Who you had a guy on your show here recently, Mike Hackney,
Oh, yeah.
who is one of my favorite local poets.
Oh, he's incredible.
He is.
And he's so driven at it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
and
jealous
he's so,
of that.
humble. Mm-hmm. This guy who really has some pretty amazing abilities and has this humility. And I love to hear him read his poetry. Just he has this voice that's just perfect for.
You talk
for the
about a
poem
rhythm
piece.
and a cadence.
Yeah.
Like when he reads when he's on, and he like does a live reading. One of the things I love, like he's one of my favorite local poets too, and he's highly accomplished, really, in the poetry world. Like he has several books, like he's done a lot of like good work for years, and he writes every day. But when he reads, he has like a rhythm, like a song. Mm-hmm. That like you can just feel like you can almost tap your beat to his reading.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have that all the time. Maybe I'm more. I tell everybody poetry has genres. Like Mike. I don't know what. I don't want to classify him, but like maybe my poetry be more punk rock. At least I hope it is sometimes. And punk rock has more of a jagged rhythm. I don't know.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Like in my own ego, I guess that's what I imagine myself to be, a punk rock poet. I guess.
Yeah.
But whatever. So your first book was about the year 2016 and 1963, you were saying?
Yeah.
So did you just like sit down and decide, hey, I'm going to write a book? I mean, how does that take place? Like, you've never written a book before. You've been writing poetry, and you just sit down and you're like, you know what? The world's crazy this year.
Yeah.
Screw it. I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, and I wanted it to be kind of a happy book, I mean, not that everything in it is happy. The month of November is devoted to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There's a story in it, I think, in the month of May called Mr. Henderson, and it's about an old guy in town who nobody really understands or knows anything about, and kind of how he's made fun of. And how after he dies, people realize, actually the main character, John, kind of realizes what a good guy this guy really was and what sadness he had in his life, So it's not like every story in it has a happy ending, so to speak, but it overall is a happy book. And this might sound, I don't want to sound like I don't want to compare myself to anybody who's a really good writer, but Ray Bradbury wrote a book called Dandelion Wine. It's my favorite book of all time. And it's just this beautiful story of kids growing up in Greentown, Illinois in 1921. It's so beautifully written. His descriptions and it's just the most wonderful book. And I kind of wanted my book to be sort of a 1963 version of Dandelion Wine in a way. And that probably sounds egotistical because in no way, shape, or form do I write like Ray Bradbury. I don't. I don't mean to compare myself to him, but I wanted to try to capture that essence somehow for 1963.
Yeah.
So
I think it's so. You have a doctor's degree in nursing, but not in writing.
Not in writing. That's right.
Not that you didn't write at all, because I know my brother. My brother who got his doctor's degree in nursing, I know he did some term papers and some research projects and things.
Yeah.
But I'm a college dropout, and I always like to think of myself as how did I? So I've had a lot of poetry published, but I don't have a degree in poetry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I learned how to be a poet by reading poetry. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's just fine to like Like Charles Bukowski's my favorite poet.
Yeah.
You know, not that I could ever write a poem like Charles Bukowski, but I feel like that's okay to want to be, you know, like I can imagine if I was a painter, which I suck at painting. I tell people that's why I'm a poet. I can't paint, sing, or dance. Like there's nothing left in art except for writing poetry. You know, like that's where all the misfits wind up in the poetry world, you know. But if I could paint, like I would love to paint like Edward Hopper. That's my favorite artist, one of my favorite artists. You know, and I wish I could paint like a cafe scene. Like I would try that. If I could paint, I would try to paint Nighthawks. You know, because that's my favorite painting.
Yeah.
Not that I could ever pay tribute to that.
Yeah.
But so what I'm saying, I guess, is I feel like that's acceptable to read something so beautiful like Dandelion Wine. By the way, one of the beautiful things about having all these cool, interesting people in this studio is I have these note cards that you might see me taking notes on, Theresa. And what I do is, like, if you say something I might want to write down to go back and ask you something later about it, right? But most importantly, on the back, I write down recommendations. So now I know when I get time, I can go buy Ray Bradbury's books. I bet I can order it from Gathering Volumes from our friend Denise.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's where I try to buy all of my books
Yeah.
from, in case, unless somebody buys me some crazy Amazon gift card or something, which happens. But I do this all the time. Like I'll just message Denise, "Hey Denise, I need this book." Hey, no problem. It's this much. It'll be here in 3 days or 7 days, whatever. Sometimes she'll ship it to me. Sometimes I go. I like to go pick it up. 'Cause it's cool to hang out with her, and it's cool to see what other books are around. I love bookstore. Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, I always go to bookstores.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go. But now I know. I bet you I read Dandelion Wine in the next 90 days probably. That's been the cool thing.
If you don't love it, I'll be surprised.
But I feel like it's okay to see something so beautiful in art and want to aspire to that. That's fine. Like there's nothing egotistical about that. That's, you know. So, okay.
I just keep trying to get better. The next book I wrote was called...
I was going to ask you, when you finished that first book, when you got all the way done, like how did it feel? Did it feel like a sense of triumph? Did it feel like you accomplished something? Or did you just know, hey, I'm going to sit down and do this, and you did it?
I did feel like I had accomplished something that I never really thought I would do. I had written, in fact, that story I mentioned earlier, Mr. Henderson, was a story I had written years and years and years ago. And I got it out and kind of revamped it a little bit. And that kind of helped me realize I could make a whole book of these kinds of stories.
So you had written some stories, just not a book.
Yeah, just a couple of short stories, I did primarily write poetry when I was younger, but in any event, I once I got that story done, then I kind of felt like I wanted to write a book about. I'm stuck in the '60s a little bit, I guess. But
I love the '60s.
I wanted to write about.
I sometimes think I was born in the wrong decade. Like I would have loved to have been like the punk rock radical socialist. in the 60s, You know?
Hey, my favorite rock song of all time is "Won't Get Fooled Again" by The Who. You know, and that was like the first rock and roll song that I kind of thought yes. Yeah.
I always argue the Who is the most underrated band.
Oh.
Even though they're not underrated at all.
Yeah.
But they should be talked about like the Beatles and the Stones because they're that iconic. They really are.
I agree.
Like they're amazing.
Yeah.
But
well, I wrote this book called Ragged Road, and it was about.
Is that the second book?
Yes.
Okay.
And this one was about a young couple in 1968 who get pregnant out of wedlock. These are kids from North Carolina. The girl's father is a rich patriarch related to the guy who was the first governor of North Carolina, and kind of how much he does not like this middle-class boy that she's in love with. These two kids want to get married. The father says they ain't getting married, and he whisks her off in the middle of the night to a maternity home. And the boyfriend is unable to find her. He really loves her, wants to get married, wants to be a father to this baby. She's forced to give the baby up, and it's kind of all about their experiences. And this is before the time that men had any rights to the child if they were not married to the girl. And I felt like I wanted to kind of not just talk about what a girl might go through in a maternity home at that time, but also talk about how frustrating it was for these young men who had absolutely no rights in the eyes of the law to anything to do with this child that they maybe wanted to be the father to, you know. So that book doesn't really necessarily have a happy ending, but you sort of are left hanging a little bit. And it is one that people have said to me a number of times, you need to write a sequel to this. He needs to go find his daughter, you know. So maybe I will. I don't know. Part of it's kind of funny. As I get done with a book, I kind of feel like I've closed the door on that book now. It's time to move on to the next one, you know. So
I was going to ask you, when people recommend, hey, you should write a poem about this or you should do that, do you like, I always kind of like find that abrasive a little bit. Like I really just want to write poems about whatever I want to write about.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
like I
yeah.
feel like I bristle at
Yeah.
that. Do you feel that same reaction or?
I don't really. You know, I kind of take it as a compliment that people think that I could write well enough to write about that thing.
Maybe I should look at it like
You know,
that. as a
so yeah. So
Well, maybe I'm so amazed that people like my work, I guess sometimes. Not that I'm amazed by it. Because sometimes when you write something, like I'll write something, I'm like, boy, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
You know, and maybe that's a little
Yeah.
ego, I don't know. But by and large, other people will say, oh, yeah, that is good. But it's not, I don't know, I guess, like I'm just a poet. I work in a factory. Like, why would anybody care? I don't know. So when they say something like, maybe I'm just so amazed they actually think I'm a good writer, I guess. Maybe. I don't feel it as a compliment, you know. So you finished that
yeah.
Ragged Road.
Yeah. And then the next book I wrote was called 7 Secrets. So
Okay.
I would like into, you know,
So Ragged
alliteration
Road is
there.
also fiction.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
and 7 Secrets.
It's also fiction.
Okay.
And listen, that was fun to write, but I think it's probably the least favorite of the books that I've written. I feel like somehow I could have done a better job on that, but again, it was kind of one of those things, like when I was done, and you know, people seemed to like it all right. But it's about a group of boys, again, Northwest Ohio, you know, kind of late 60s, all these kids growing up together. And one of the young men in this group of boys dies of kind of questionable circumstances. And the fact that these boys keep the circumstances of his death secret really impacts their lives in ways that you wouldn't maybe think of, you know. And so it's kind of all about what happens to them as they grow up. And several of the kids get killed off in this book, you know, and
So maybe it's not all happy endings and
Yeah.
rainbows either, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I had to go back to that. The most recent book I completed is called, well, it's Love to the 10th Power, and it's about my grandparents, and it is fiction too, because you know you can't go back and
So
recreate
that's book number 5
conversations.
now you're talking about. The
This
most
is
recent?
book number 4.
Okay,
Yeah.
book number 4, okay.
Yeah,
That's
this
the
one.
book you
Yeah,
brought as a
yeah.
gift.
Yeah.
So Theresa, we debated. As a writer myself, I wanted to pay her for a book. She doesn't know this. I'm gonna double cross her here, guys, shamelessly. When she leaves tonight, I'm gonna go on Amazon. I'm gonna order a couple of books. I'll probably, actually, more importantly, I was gonna stop at Gathering Volumes yesterday, and I didn't. I'll stop in at Gathering Volumes and pick up a couple of her books, so I can make sure I pay an artist too. But Theresa gifted us a copy of Love to the 10th Power. Is that 10th degree?
Yeah, to the 10th power. Yep.
So she's a doctor and I'm not. Love to the 10th Power. So is this fiction? It says based on a true story.
It is based on a true story. It's based on my grandparents' lives, and I loved my grandparents, and you know, we had great fun memories of my grandparents, but I had not a clue how tough their lives were when they were a young married couple going through the Depression. My grandma almost died twice, and they had 10 kids. You know, so it was just kind of their story and what it was like for them to go. There was a period of time she had tuberculosis and was in, they called them sanatoriums at the time, down in Mount Vernon, Ohio, which was far away from where she lived. She had 4 little children at that point, and all the kids had to get farmed out to family members and friends
Wow.
to be raised, because my grandpa, I mean, there was no such thing as health insurance then. You know, he had to work day and night to be able to afford to keep her in this sanatorium while she got well, you know. And it hit me what an amazing life story they had, and I just wanted to document that and share it with people, you know. And it's pretty amazing to hear the feedback on this book. I actually wrote it kind of as a love letter to my family, to my dad's family, you know. And the number of people who have bought the book and then come back to me and said, like, this was a really good story. I really enjoyed this story. And again, marveling that this family went through all the things that they went through. And you know, the truth of the matter is, now, maybe not everybody had a mom who nearly died a couple of times. She had meningitis at one time, too. But lots and lots of people have family stories that are like this, growing up during the Depression and everything that people had to contend with then, you know. It's not really an uncommon story, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason why people like it. They can kind of relate to it. They know their own family history was very similar, you know.
No, that's kind of like John Grisham. Like, some of his books are, like, he has a book called A Painted House.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
about growing up on a farm in Arkansas. And he was a Cardinals fan.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up working on doing some farm work as a kid. I was a Cardinals fan. You know, like, sometimes art is finding beauty in those common everyday things, and that's what makes you an artist or a writer. You know? Let me ask you this. So, you've mentioned your books that you've written now and your poetry and stories that you've written. How much of your personal experience bleeds into your work? You know, like, I've noticed a lot of my poetry, not a lot of it, some of it, a lot of my, I just finished a book for the first time myself. A lot of it has some autobiographical tones, a lot of personal experience. You know, I also like to embellish and exaggerate and make it fiction, but, like, how much of that bleeds into your work?
I think more than we maybe want to confess to. You know, I don't think you can help it. Writing comes from your soul, and your soul is impacted by all these events that happen to you as a person, or events that you see other people go through, you know. And so I think you can't help but have your life experience bleed into your writing. Again, that's why I always kind of feel concerned about whether, in poetry particularly, do people get what I'm talking about? You know, it makes sense to me. This poem makes sense to me, but does this guy reading it across the table from me, does it make sense to him? You know,
Yeah.
Sometimes, poetry for me isn't always that you got to get a message out of it, to be honest with you. Poetry sometimes to me is just how the words are strung together and how beautiful. How beautiful it sounds, the sound of the words and how they're strung together. You know, two of my favorite lyricists are Sting and Billy Joel. Billy Joel's old
Billy
stuff.
Joel's, yeah. Sting, too.
Once he met Christy
don't like Sting as
Brinkley,
much, but yeah, Billy Joel's.
Yeah, once he met Christy Brinkley, he kind of got a little sappy at times. But his old stuff,
Even some of that's good, you know.
Yeah. He was brilliant, and he used intelligent words. I mean, he was not just baby kind of lyrics, you know. And so it's not always about the message, although those two guys obviously were able to convey amazing messages through their songwriting too, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well,
life experience is
I think that's the cool thing. Like, there's definitely poetry out there, and you read it and you're like, holy shit, that's art.
Yeah.
But then you'll read another poem and you're like, oh, haha, they said whatever, dog turds in their poem. I don't know. You know, like there's all kinds of different, there really is, like, sometimes you do write poetry. Like, I don't know, I guess I do have poetry sometimes. It's just, you find some phrases that sound cool together and you write them down, And I think if I was a painter, I'd probably do that. Fuck, I don't know shit about painting. Here I go cussing already. That's. But if I could paint, I would probably just paint things to paint them. Like, I'm sure, artists do that.
Yeah, exactly
So,
right. Yeah.
Do you? So my wife Libby met you at the workshop, the writers' workshop.
Yep.
Do you workshop your poetry there, or your stories, your books?
You know something I did once COVID hit and we were doing everything virtually. God, I hate to sound like such a dunce, but I couldn't figure out Zoom and Google Docs at the same time. It's like I'm trying to do a Zoom meeting with people and then open up documents and like make edits to them and save them and send them back to the person. And I just couldn't contend with it at the time. And I thought, this is not the way I want to do this, you know. So I haven't attended Toledo Writers Workshop pretty much all summer long. And, you know,
Yeah.
God only knows when we'll ever be able to all see each other in person again.
Like hopefully
But-
soon, but
Yeah.
hopefully there's an end to this eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. Jessica Clemish, who I'm going to hire to edit this next book I'm working on, has started a virtual write night on Monday nights. And last night I attended for the first time, and that was great. We all Zoomed in together, talked a little bit about what our writing goals were for the evening, what we were working on, and what we hoped to accomplish in this 2-hour period. We all signed off, went to work, and then at 9 o'clock we all signed back on and kind of talked about what we did and whether
That's
we
cool,
felt like it was
yeah.
productive or not. And that was that I can deal with, you know. It's like,
Yeah, I've done a couple of Zoom poetry readings, or attended some and participated in some, and it's different. That's been my thing. Like I have it, you know, I try to go to a poetry reading, a live reading every week if I can.
yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just like number one, I love poetry, but number two, it's the people.
Yeah,
You know, it's getting to spend an hour with Mike Hackney.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's getting to hang out with Bob Phillips or Johnny McIntyre, some of these other local poets that are so creative. And I've always, like, I talk about this ad nauseum, but I've got this theory that creative people have an energy. And if you hang around with them, it's contagious.
yeah.
You know, if you're working on a book and you're almost done, and I hang out and you're like, you know, hey, Theresa, how you been? You're like, oh, Dan, you know, I've really been, like when Mike Hackney was here, like he was like, oh, I'm on a creative peak. And he's reading these new poems, and I'm like, man, I feel like I need to like write when he left. Like I need to sit down and work on something, you know, like it's inspiring, you know, and I feel like that's what I miss that about going to live poetry readings. I don't get that creative energy,
Yeah.
you know, by osmosis. But the really neat thing is, I've been on a couple readings where there was like a poet from Toledo and one from Florida and one from San Francisco, all in the same reading.
Yeah.
With things you wouldn't normally be able to do. And maybe even after we get to be safe to have live readings again, maybe we can still use some Zoom things. I'm hoping. I don't know. I bought a business account for the studio.
Yeah. Well,
I just don't know what to do with it yet.
I do think Zoom is
But-
great for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to change our world. I mean,
I
you
think
know,
so too, yeah.
Being able to connect with people far away. Last night on this virtual write night, there were people from Iowa. You know, Jessica
Yeah.
has her MFA from Iowa's writing school, which, you know, they have a great
you know,
reputation.
that's one of the most
Yeah.
prestigious writing programs in the country, right?
Yeah. And
Not
so,
the name drop, yeah.
yeah. But she, you know, had friends from Iowa that
Mm-hmm.
were sharing this night with us, and thought, these are people I never would have met without Zoom. You
Yeah.
know, so it is cool for that
That
kind
is
of
neat,
stuff.
yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more. The idea of being in the same room with people. I know when I was in my VP job, people used to probably think like, oh my God, couldn't we have done this on email? But sometimes you got to have people in the same room and let the thinking flow, because you just don't get that same thing on email.
It's different. There's a
or,
personal
you know.
connection, yeah.
Yep.
And there is, you know, and I'm smart enough to read all the studies that say that communication's only 30% verbal or 70%, whatever the numbers are. And it is true. Like body language is important.
Yeah.
You know, tone of inflection and like whether or not somebody's distracted. Like all of those things play into poetry readings and live music shows and business meetings. Like all of those things are important. So
Yeah.
you have speaking of music being important, and not to change topics, but I do have ADHD. But your son's a musician,
Yes, he is. Yeah. Yep,
highly
Aaron.
accomplished.
He's a very good guitar player.
That's-
Aaron's a very good guitar player. so-
Mike McCoy is friends with, that knows him,
Yeah.
and he comes highly recommended. And
Yeah.
by the way, Mike was telling me I got to get him on the show eventually too. So
Aaron's a good guy. He's got a big heart. Everybody that knows Aaron loves him. He's got more friends than any human being I know.
that's amazing. That means he's doing something well, you know. Is your daughter into music at all then, or?
You know something? Amy was a dancer. She took dance
Okay.
lessons as a kid, and she, you know, I marvel at how full of grace, and she was so emotive in her dancing. I always thought she was an amazing dancer, you know. she's not doing that now, and she's actually got a pretty nice singing voice, and she's always had a real good sense of rhythm. I think Frank always hoped she'd pick up the drums.
Yeah.
So, and who knows, maybe she will someday.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's never too late to start, right?
Nope, it sure isn't.
So, but she's not doing anything musically.
Well, how
right
old were
now,
you when you
so.
finished your first book?
Oh gosh, okay, I have to think about that for a second. So I would have been 63.
So it's never too late to start.
Yeah, that's right.
Like that's,
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so there's a lot of creativity in the family then. So
I would say we are kind of a,
that's my 16-year-old son. So I always loved sports, and I couldn't play music. My parents bought me a piano. I took piano lessons for 6 months. Hated it.
Yeah.
My little brother, the doctor's degree in nursing, has a baby grand piano now in his home that he and his partner have built. He's an incredibly accomplished pianist now.
Oh, wow.
He got the piano that I didn't want, and picked up the lessons and took off with them. So, growing up, I played sports and I loved music, and I always wanted to be a writer because I loved to read.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I found Shel Silverstein when I was a kid. I started writing poetry when I was in 3rd grade. Won my first contest, and I was hooked ever since.
Yeah.
But, my son played baseball for a long time. And then he went to high school, and he's like, Dad, I think he was kind of afraid to tell me, but he's like, Dad, I kind of don't want to play baseball. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be overbearing, I don't want my kids to do stuff because I want them to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want them to try a bunch of things and find things they like. Well, he joined the band his freshman year, and I'm not musically inclined. Like, he's not inheriting anything from me musically wise, but he played percussion. And then, I remember after his freshman year, he's like, Dad, he's like, if I don't get to play the snare drum as my sophomore year, progress, I'm going to quit. And I don't want my son to be a quitter, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So we talked about it. He went to summer band camp, and I just told him, he had his, practice drum, and I'm like, hey, I'm like, just work hard at it. I don't know anything about drums. I don't. But I'm like, work hard at it, see what happens, and if you don't get it, we'll talk. Well, sure enough, he got a drum spot, and he's been hooked ever since. He's a junior this year. He was looking forward to band camp this summer.
Yeah.
He's a junior now, so of course he's in in the marching band. He's well established in the marching band. He did say it's weird because they got to march 6 feet apart. In fact, I think in 2 Fridays I'm supposed to go to their last home game. They get 2 tickets per band member now.
Sure.
So I'll get to go to one football game this year.
Yeah.
And watch my son play in the band one time.
Yeah.
That was the the one fall tradition was I always go see him play.
Yeah.
In the marching band and then lead in the 3rd quarter because I had to work the next day. But
I think kids, no matter whether it's a sport or music or whatever, there was a time when Amy didn't want to dance. She wanted to quit dance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't keep flexing that muscle, you never do get any better at it. So a lot of it is just about continuity. Just keep trying to flex the muscle. I wish that I would have kept writing. I wish I would have never really stopped writing for that period of years, or playing the piano for that period of years that I didn't do either one of those things, because I know I would be better at both of those things now than I am. You know?
But you were off getting a doctor's degree, and you were. It's not like you were just sitting still doing nothing.
Yeah,
life. You were running a hospital. You were.
It was definitely a busy life. There's no doubt about it. And I was really focused a lot on the kids. That kind of stuff. So you're just kind of on a different path for a while. When I retired is when I guess my brain got to open up a little bit again to think maybe I could sit down and do a little writing again, you know.
So you have another book that's almost done now, or is done, you said?
I would say
it's book?
Probably, I would say maybe about a third done.
Okay.
Maybe a little past a third done. It's getting pretty close to 35,000 words right now that I've got in, without really a lot of editing at this point. So it is a darker tale, and again, it does kind of come from life. I've known a lot of women who've been victims of sexual assault, and this story is about a group of survivors who are led by a Toledo police detective. They kind of have a support group, and in the course of new members coming into this support group, one of the young women commits suicide. And she never would name her rapist to the police, but she named her rapist to one of the women in the group, who kind of spills this kid's name in the group. And one of the women is just kind of goes rogue. She feels like no one's really doing anything to address this issue in society, and she starts murdering people.
Okay.
So there's a lot of murder
Becomes a
and mayhem
vigilante.
in this book. Yeah, she kind of sees herself as an avenging angel, so to speak, and so this my goal last night for our write night was to write an autopsy scene, so I was able to do that. It was 2 hours of really, and I just let it flow, and it all came together. And I looked at it again today, and I thought, something, I don't think this chapter is a bad chapter, so, but like I say, this book I'm going to have professionally edited, and I think maybe this book, the potential, I suppose, is there for it to be maybe a more marketable type of book than stuff I've written in the past. And so I might try to kind of go through more traditional literary publication processes to see if anybody out there is interested in it. I'll tell you, I started this book years ago, and it's one of those books that it's been inside me to talk about this topic, and how, there are so many people in the world that don't understand, why don't these women come forward? Why do they wait 40 years to come forward and talk about this stuff? Because people don't have a clue the shame and the vulnerability that goes along with sexual assault, when you're the victim of sexual assault, and how long it takes to kind of come to terms with that. Some people never turn their life back around again,
Yeah, that's something I don't pretend to know what a woman feels like, but I have experienced some traumas in my life and can relate those to,
Yeah.
I don't talk as openly public about them, but one-on-one I've learned that men don't talk about mental health and sexual trauma.
Yeah.
And we should.
Yes, absolutely.
And the more open we are about it, I think the more commonplace it is, and the more people can, hopefully find become comfortable finding help.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's things that affected anyway. Not to go too far down that hole, but I was thinking when you were talking about the topics of this book you're writing, like every one of your books has tackled some pretty heavy stuff. Like you're not just writing about romance and rainbows, and like you're tackling some pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And I gotta think maybe that I would imagine like a lot of the stuff, like in your career, working like in the psych ward. Or, you didn't say psych ward, but working in a psychiatric anyway, and working in an ICU.
Yeah.
Would really kind of lead to like some of these darker parts of society kind of being in your environment, I guess, a lot. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I kind of stuttered around.
Oh, no, I know exactly
but
what you're saying. Again, it's how real life bleeds into what you're writing. Yeah.
So let me ask you, so you spent a lot of your career, like you said, in psychiatric, ICU and surgery, but then you spent a lot of your career also in administrative and managerial. So what was that like? What was it like making that shift to like...
I feel like I learned a lot. I think that when you are working in staff, you think management is one thing, and then when you get into that role, you find out it's really a lot different than what you were expecting. I guess I felt like generally I always had pretty decent people skills. I think that overall I was pretty well liked. And I don't mean to sound vain in that, because I could be an asshole sometimes.
If Mike McCoy refers you, you're a pretty good person normally. Like he's by and large
Yeah, well, Mike's a pretty good person too.
And Libby, and my wife. Libby's a pretty good judge of character.
Yeah, so.
Not that you need to be judged. I'm not.
No, I know what you mean. I know that, I definitely have my days when I was being a jerk, or just like something was not sitting right with me and I could be grouchy or whatever, But I think overall people thought I was a pretty decent human being,
Yeah.
And so I was also lucky to be at St. Luke's Hospital, like I said before, surrounded by a team of people who all were kind of committed to the same goals, had the same value sets in terms of what we were doing there, And so when you have that kind of group, it makes your life a lot easier,
Yeah.
You find out in management you end up spending about 80% of your time on 20% of the problems. Like the people that, because most of the people working in the organization are awesome. So we had some bad apples that you have to deal with. We had lots of financial issues. St. Luke's was in dire financial straits.
I was going to say,
right
like,
as I was coming
imagine
into that job.
There's probably a different level or different kind of stress
It
involved with
absolutely
the
is.
managerial side compared to, like, working on the floor, I guess you would say.
Yep, and there are lots of competing interests from the stakeholders in the hospital. The doctors have one point of view, and the nurses have one point of view, and the folks who work in environmental services have another point of view, and the community has an entirely different point of view,
Yeah.
and their expectations of hospitals have changed a lot over the years.
I do know St. Luke's. By the way, my 9-year-old daughter was born there.
Yeah.
But it's everybody I know has always spoke very highly of St. Luke's. That's
Yeah. It's not perfect. It's just like, but man, I'm going to tell you what, people's hearts are in the right place.
It's a valuable community
Yep,
resource.
It sure is.
Let me ask you, and if I get too political or if this is something you don't want to talk about, just give me the signal, all right?
Okay.
But I know you mentioned ProMedica earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anything about hospitals and the medical business. I do know something because I read a lot, and I have family members that work in the medical field. I know people, but I don't know any. Like I'm a factory worker, right? So ProMedica recently was making a move to take over UTMC, and I know Cardi Pinkbinder was opposing that, and my natural inclinations, and from what I understand about it, like I feel like it's a bad idea. I don't fully understand the whole situation, but it seems like ProMedica is kind of consuming a lot of resources, and just my natural instincts tell me it's probably good that ProMedica has some competition. Like it's probably good that we have some second opinions available in the medical field.
Yep.
Am I wrong in thinking that? Is that
no?
Like I'm sure you were talking about different perspectives. Like I know your perspective on that issue has to be drastically more educated than mine.
I don't know about that. I think ProMedica has been accused a lot of being predatory almost in wanting to take over other hospitals, or I don't really feel like that was my experience with ProMedica.
No, and I don't want to be too mean to them because they are a valuable resource,
Yeah,
I just did physical therapy there.
Yeah.
And they treated me very well.
Exactly. I learned a long time ago if you could be up in the sky and pull the roof off of every one of these hospitals, no matter what system they were a part of, the people working in those hospitals are all there because they really want to try to do a good thing for their community and their neighbors, and they're there with the same ideas that we're going to try to do a good job and take good care of people and get them back out of here so they can live the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes, kind of in the executive suites, I think that the perspective is a little different, and so I think that's where people sometimes feel like they have a little bit of a beef with whatever hospital or hospital system, that they feel like there are some practices that are not really in the best interest of the community, or so. But like I say, I think Toledo is lucky with the healthcare facilities they have all over town.
Two top-notch children's hospitals.
Yeah, exactly right.
Some world-class heart treatment.
Yeah, exactly right. They're great cardiothoracic surgeons in this
Cancer
town. Holy mackerel. And
treatments,
neurosurgeons too. I mean, we have some good resources in our town for what are we,
Toledo really
300,000 people, or
Yeah, we're really lucky in general. Toledo, I mean, art museum.
Yeah,
we're talking about the music scene, the poetry scene, the art scene, minor league baseball, the zoo, Huntington Center. We have world-class Toledo really is lucky in a lot of ways.
Yes, we are.
Anyway, not to shift gears too much. saw you brought some poetry with you.
Yeah.
And I know you said that you're on, I guess, not as confident.
I'm not.
But I would really love to hear you read some poetry. I recently, so confession, my wife shared on Facebook a poem that you wrote recently. And I think that was the first poem of yours I've ever read. And it was good. I enjoyed it, by the way.
It must be the one called Holy Ground. I brought that with
It
me
was.
tonight.
Not that
Yeah.
that's you need any of my validation whatsoever. But I was hoping that would boost your confidence, I guess, a little. But
Well, thanks.
Would you care to share some of your poetry with us that you
Yeah,
brought?
sure. Yeah, I'd be glad
I'd love to
to.
hear that. Okay. She's got some typed, looks like printed from a computer paper.
Yeah.
I noticed as compared to sometimes I scribble in a notebook and
Yeah, my handwriting is so bad.
Mine too,
I'd
but-
write it down and never be able to tell what
I'm
the
the only
heck
one
I
that
wrote.
can read it, so it's like secret code.
Yeah. You know something, I used to, obviously before computers came around, I only ever worked in longhand, and I didn't think I ever would switch over to a computer. But you know something, I started, especially like when I had to write my doctoral dissertation and that kind of junk, I just got so used to sitting right down at the computer, writing and editing in the computer that I've never really gone back to longhand, unless I'm somewhere where I don't have access to a computer. And I get an idea for a poem or something, and I start scratching down ideas on a piece of scrap paper out of my purse
of a
or something.
napkin or
Yeah,
something.
exactly
Those are the
right.
best
you know,
poems.
yeah. Or I downloaded a notes app in my
Yeah.
phone.
Yep, me too.
So,
Yep.
so I can at least start something in my phone.
Well, I
you
got to
know.
do that or I'll forget.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
I
'cause
wonder how
it's-
many good lines I've forgotten.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, I know, isn't that the truth? Holy mackerel! How many poems have we
Yes,
lost?
yeah.
So yeah. I need Mike Hackney here to read these for me because he's such a beautiful
Oh, he
poetry
is,
reader.
yeah. So melodic, yeah.
Well, this one's called About Ellery. The sun and moon both shine on the iceberg, pure and pristine. I see it gleam and glitter as it glides on glistening glass, serene. Yet underneath the surface, in the freezing darkness, lurks something rough and rasping that rips a ragged fissure, allowing frigid water to fill my family's fractured hull. I cannot swim. I push up for air, my lungs and brain aching, until I emerge, gasping, groping, ascending. The uncaring iceberg moves its own way, drifting ahead, not looking back, as if nothing bad has happened, as if no one was hurt. But I'm just now beginning to catch my breath.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, this one's Holy Ground. This is probably the one you saw.
That is, yeah.
I close my eyes and recall that we found a dead field mouse lying in the fountain grass by the railroad tracks where we often walked. She bent forward to retrieve it, and I told her not to pick it up. But, Mom, he needs a funeral. I stopped her hand, pulled a used tissue from my hip pocket, and wrapped it around the mouse's body. Its hair was half gone. Where should we bury him, sweetheart? She cocked her head, considering. I don't think we should put him under the dirt. I think he should have a funeral like Daddy's. We made a little fire in the backyard. The field mouse, resting on some cotton balls in an old Tom McCann shoebox, was placed on a fire pit pyre with great reverence by my 6-year-old. Her beautiful hair, the hair I once wove ribbons into, was falling out in clumps. Chemo ravaged her from the inside, making itself known on her outside. My eyes burned. Are you crying, Mom? Oh, it's just the smoke from the fire. We watched the orange flames consume the box, the cotton, the mouse. She stood silent for a long time, then turned to face me. Don't put me under the dirt, Mom. Let me have a funeral like Daddy's. She knew. She hugged me around the legs, not letting go for a long time. Neither did I loosen my grip on her. Now her head rests on cotton, a bleach-bright pillowcase stamped with this hospital's name. Her eyes are closed, but a smile slips her lips. I'm sure she's walking through the fountain grass by the railroad tracks. This time she must walk alone. Where she goes, I cannot travel. At least not now. And as I contemplate whether it would be better to drink the desperate poison or humbly fall on my knees, she breathes her last. The smile is still in place. A glow surrounds her. Even now, she is peace, love not bound by the finality of death. I make my decision and bend the knee. I am on holy ground.
Wow.
Thanks. All right, this is my love letter to Frank. This is called The Love of... Listen, I still like poems that rhyme. Not everybody likes poems that rhymes. You know, that's kind of like they've gone out of vogue in certain circles.
They have gone out of vogue, but every once in a while you hear one and you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, that's...
So this has got a little bit of a rhyme
perfectly
scheme. So this is called The Love of Nonsense and the Nonsense of Love. Babe, you're stuck to me like glue. Or maybe gum on the bottom of my shoe. Tangled like roots of lily of the valley, bizarre, surreal as Salvador Dali in his dreamy, illustrious heyday. Our connection barely stood a chance of learning steps to this complex dance. Just two kids on lazy afternoons, floating on air like colored balloons, reaching up for the heavens. Later, we unloaded our personal freight in all-night coffeehouse debates about the nature of love, the nature of man, and how the universe began, and how it will end. Then, tentative kisses we had trouble ending sparked a passion that left us trembling. Marriage and children and houses and cars. Every day I thank the stars for this plainly astonishing life. Now it's down to me and you, clutching on what to remains true. Still laughing, crying, holding hands. Age has become the shifting sand beneath our wrinkled feet. As for me, it matters not what we have and haven't got. You are more than life to me, a sweet and ancient melody. Oh, the songs we've sung.
Wow. I got to clap on that one.
Oh, thanks.
I can just imagine, like, what I didn't do that poem. You know, all the songs we've sung.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible.
And you think about how your life goes, you know. Yeah, and not all the songs have a good melody, you know. But they are our songs, and we carry them with us, and maybe we'll carry them into the next world too, you know. So
that's amazing. So I hope like we're an hour and a half.
Oh wow! Holy mackerel!
Hour 25 minutes or so into our conversation here today, and you thought you'd be a boring guest. We could probably go another hour and a half, and I'd be fascinated for all night. So. Well, you got anything else you want to add? Where can we find? So go on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online to find your books.
Yep. Or
do they just search
volumes.
Theresa Konwinski?
Yeah, I think if you just search Theresa Konwinski,
I'll try to find some
books,
links and put them up on the podcast.
Oh, okay,
on the site too, so people.
Yep.
I want to encourage people to go buy your books. That's kind of what we're doing this.
Yeah,
so just to finish up, maybe 20 minutes ago, we were talking about the book that she gave as a gift, Love and the 10th Power. We're going to give that away as a prize somehow from the Blue Collar Gospel Hour.
By the way, I love that name.
Books. Thank you.
That's a great name.
So I love words, and like one of the definitions of gospel is the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, there's just not enough stuff out there for working middle class, Midwestern, you know.
Yeah.
Hardworking people. You know?
Exactly right. Yep.
So,
yep. I know. Don't you love the Midwest?
I used to hate it. I used to really. You know, because I wanted to be a writer, and because I traveled to New York City when I was young. I've always traveled. You know, I went to L.A. when I was young, and I saw all these cool places. I saw the Pacific Ocean, and I saw, you know, Broadway, and, you know, the Midwest just doesn't have that pizzazz. But the older I get, the more I appreciate raising a family here.
Yeah.
The more I appreciate the art in Chicago.
Yep.
And the blue-collar attitude we have to our artists.
Yep.
And you know, I mean, look at the singer-songwriters from the Midwest, you know.
Yeah.
MC5.
Yeah.
Countless.
Pick
Bob
out
Seger.
the jams.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's think about the writers and you know, like there's amazing, incredible people in the Midwest. You know? So, yeah, I'm so damn proud to be, you know, like that's, we got a chip on our shoulder in the Midwest that they don't have anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's, I'm proud to be from here. That's.
You know, people in the Midwest aren't afraid of hard work.
Yeah.
And they are caring and concerned about their neighbors. I lived in Baltimore for about 3 years. Now, I still have some really good friends in Baltimore that I keep in touch with, but Baltimore was so different from here.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to make friends down there. Now, once you make friends there, they're friends for life, but it took a long time. People really keep you at arm's length, and I missed the Midwest for its friendliness and just openness, and yeah.
No, I think,
great place to
and
live.
maybe it's because this is home to me,
Yeah.
and I'm biased, but there's a sense of community in the Midwest
Yep.
that I haven't felt other places.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So,
Yep.
well, anyway, thanks for coming and joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for
It's
having
been
me.
so
It was
great
a
hanging
blast.
out. I can't wait to share this with everybody. I learned a ton. Like I said, this is the beauty of building a podcast. Really, is I don't ever have to leave my house anymore. Cool people hang out here. Like that's really the, So anyway, thanks for joining us. Looking forward to sharing more of your work and reading your books when they come out. And just thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
So, all right, everybody, thanks for listening. And if you like what we shared with you tonight, share it with your friends.